Wow. We are live. Thank you for joining us for this extraordinary moment to be able to connect with director and actor, writer, friend Justin Baldoni, Dr. Adrienne Boissy from the Cleveland Clinic, and Natassia Singh from Memorial Sloan Kettering. And we'll get to have a special guest appearance from Dr. Shoshana Ungerleider very, very soon. So I hope all of you have seen the movie. It's extraordinary. And we're gonna get deeply into it. This is one of those rare moments where something happens out there in mainstream world with partners like Disney, and such incredible talent that goes into making this beautiful story available to so many people. But we actually have the moment today to stop and connect the Hollywood world with the healthcare world. And we don't do this often enough. We don't stop when these moments happen culturally and say, what can we learn from each other? What can we learn from this moment? How can we amplify this incredible work that Justin's doing, this incredible work that Dr. Boissy is doing and Natassia Singh is doing? How can we amplify all of it together? And so we're here. My name is Michael Hebb. I'm the founder of Death Over Dinner and a new gift to the world, EOL.community. And I'll be your host today, and I mostly will be getting out of the way. But we're gonna start. I have an introductory question for each of our panelists. But first, let's get just a quick hello from Justin and Adrienne and Natassia. Go for it, Justin.
Hey, everybody. So happy to be here. So sweet. This is so sweet.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I feel really honored to be connected to the work.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here to represent not only our nursing community, but just our end-of-life caretaker community, patients, families, everyone. So I'm excited.
Yeah, and thank you for everyone, starting with Justin and Adrienne and Natassia Singh, that they'd be willing to do this, and all of the incredible partners that made it possible to gather together today. And there's such a long list. Before we go to Justin's first question, I'm gonna read the first 10 partners, and then a little bit later, I'll read a few more, but I need to make sure that everybody gets thanked because they did an extraordinary job. So before Justin's question, I wanna thank Reimagine, CTAC, Providence, the Institute for Human Caring, Memorial Sloan Kettering, the Cleveland Clinic, the Conversation Project, INELDA, Quality of Life Care, and the Schwartz Center for Compassionate Care. We are going to be sharing links to all of these incredible partners in the email to you to follow up, as well as this video. So Justin, first question to you, my friend. You went to great lengths to start telling these stories about end of life, about critical illness. You, in many ways, risked everything. I want, for those of people who haven't seen Clouds, just a basic bit about the story, if they haven't, but then the lengths that you went to tell this story in your life personally, and just how it impacted you telling the story. I know there's a lot in there, so decide where you want to go with it.
Oh, yeah. First of all, I so appreciate how fast you threw this together. This is so sweet, and this has been on my heart for a while. This idea of how do we bring art to the masses and have it also influence, in many ways, healthcare and vice versa. I think for so long our worlds have been disconnected, like we've been operating in silos, which is why I would say the majority of the time when movies come out that feature someone who's dealing with some sort of illness, the healthcare community just goes, "Oh God, just call us." You know, just we would help you. It's so not accurate, and vice versa in many ways. I feel like there's a way that we in the entertainment business can also help influence the healthcare business. And so I think, Michael, you are living at that intersection, and I appreciate you so much for that. We started similar things at similar times. I started My Last Days probably shortly after, or right around the time you started Death Over Dinner. And we've been operating in these kind of our own versions of this deep work. And I've always appreciated what you've done. And thank you, Jeffrey, who's watching, Zarowski, for connecting us. So I started a documentary series called My Last Days 8 years ago, where I left acting and I traveled the country, and I looked for amazing individuals who were living with a chronic or a terminal illness. And the thought I had was, if I could show an audience, a viewer, that this could happen to them, that all of us in many ways are dying. Like My Last Days is it's reflective of all of us. It's not just the people we're watching, it's all of us. And the question is, how are we living our last days? Like, that was the idea of the show. And I thought if we could do that, if we could de-otherize and get rid of the stigmas around what it means to have a chronic or a terminal illness, if we could put people in to the headspace and the heart space of what it's like, then maybe we could influence the way that people chose to live. Because throughout the entire experience, I had this belief that it's not until you find out you're dying that you truly change your behavior. Something happens, at least in all the experiences I've had with friends, where when there are no other options, you see the world differently. It's like taking the pill and you wake up in the Matrix and you're like, oh, wait a second. And what if we didn't have to wait for that moment? That was the premise of the show. And in that, I met some incredible people who will forever be, tattooed on my body and in my heart, that have influenced the way that I live. My last movie, 5 Feet Apart, was influenced by my dear friend. She was like a little sister, Claire Wineland, who actually did a lot of work in this space, advocating for people with cystic fibrosis and people that lived with chronic and terminal illnesses, and really wanted to impact the healthcare system to help doctors see things differently. And I'm so proud of the work that she did. And then Zach Sobiak, who I just made Clouds about. And after he passed away, I asked his mom, who wrote this gorgeous book called Fly a Little Higher, if I could turn that book into a movie. And it's been about 5.5 years since that moment, and we finally got the movie made. And there was a lot of other questions, but I feel like I would just ramble on, and I'll let you ask a specific one if you have, because that's kind of the background of it. But all of it, I will say this, all of this work for me was influenced by my belief in the Baha'i faith and quotes around and the idea around what it means to live and what it means to die. And specifically, My Last Days was inspired by a quote from Baha'u'llah, which says, "I have made death a messenger of joy for thee. Wherefore dost thou grieve?" And so the idea was, okay, how do I get people to reframe the idea of death and find joy in it? And that was kind of the backbone of the impetus for what that show is, and what Clouds is, and what 5 Feet Apart was, is where does joy lie in all of that? Because so many of the people, I have 25 documentaries in now over the last 7 years of this show, and there's so much joy. And I have a lot of thoughts about that and spiritual ideas about, where we get that. But essentially it was combining death and joy into a conversation, which doesn't normally happen. And also for me, as someone who is also afraid of death, mostly because I have so many things that I love and I'm attached to them. It's also an exercise for me every time I do a story or make a movie or meet somebody like a Zach, that kind of helps me kind of balance my lower and higher nature and find a little bit of peace and joy in it myself.
It's a beautiful response and such a great call to arms.
I don't remember your question, Michael.
No, you captured it. There's a particular bit about it that I want to get to, but we'll get back to it. It reminds me of this incredible Confucius quote, which in each life there are two lives. And the second one starts when we realize we only have one. Which,
yep.
is very much the magic of what you're talking about. Speaking of magic, we're going to turn it over to my magical friend, Dr. Adrienne Boissy, who I met through another great friend, Alex Drain, if you're listening. Adrienne and I work together, continue to work together on building the healthcare edition of Death Over Dinner with the Cleveland Clinic, and one of the most inspiring people I know, and one of the people who cares the most about empathy. So I'm going to ask you, Adrienne, to explain I mean, it's a little bit obvious, I know, but the depth of where you understand empathy and how you understand it and why it's important to the work that you do, but also tell us how you translate that to a clinical setting, one, and then also a massive, influential, clinical setting like the Cleveland Clinic, and some of the challenges and difficulties. I know I'm setting up these questions like you could write a book, but here it is, Adrienne.
Well, thanks. First of all, please call me Adrienne. I think if there's any space, we don't need fancy titles like that. I hope it's here. Well, thanks for the opportunity. I feel like a little bit of like perhaps I hope we all are survivors of brokenness. Personally, I grew up in a family with a lot of dysfunction and abuse and alcoholism. I've lost 3 fathers to the same disease. I've watched my mom try to navigate the same diagnoses and the same bad news multiple times. And I've picked those pieces up, as we all do. And I can't say they form a beautiful shape yet, but I've become something different, someone different. And I think I'm someone who's fascinated by human behavior. I'm someone who's fascinated by language and intent. I'm fascinated by how these experiences shape all of us and our lens of the world. And I really believe that there are many people who are most passionate about suffering, who've seen it themselves. And I too share the wish that Justin has, that it shouldn't have to be that you suffer in order to have the capacity to ease it or want to change the course of your life. The people who taught me are my own patients, really, my Zacs. When I care primarily for multiple sclerosis patients. I have a patient recently who found out that he may die from a side effect of medication on the same day his son was murdered. I had a patient recently who was very frustrating to my colleagues because they were seeking narcotics. And after our first discussion, sitting down at the bedside, you learn that she's set herself on fire after being raped. And the community too. I think people thrive because somebody cares and makes them feel known. I've tried to do that in my clinical practice. And some people have done that for me. I wrote about my trauma in my med school essay and nobody read it, I'm pretty sure, because nobody asked me about it until I met one woman. And that woman said, why is it that some people can grow and thrive after trauma and others can't? And I felt like I had met my soulmate. And I'm pretty sure otherwise I wouldn't have gotten into medical school because I wasn't what they were classically looking for. So it's really been an honor, I think, to bear witness to that sort of fragility in all of us. In medicine, as so many of you know, empathy is probably everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Right? We've got these amazing people that went in to heal. That's their passion. That's the root of why they're there. They're empathy amplifiers, right? To lift and heal others every single day. And I'm really humbled by them. And in healthcare, we also have processes that feel very broken for patients. We have opaque billing. We have the abyss of waiting rooms. We have language that is so foreign, people can't even understand what we're talking about. And our patients deserve more. So I think one of our biggest challenges when you ask me that is, how do we design systems that care more and not be in the business of healthcare, but in the business of caring for human beings. Those are different businesses. And I want us to be organizations that don't lay off our caregivers during COVID. I want us to be organizations that use the patient's name when we talk about our mistakes. I want us to be organizations that provide food for the families of our caregivers that went to Detroit and New York to help in the pandemic. And those are things that feel just worth fighting for. And our biggest sort of call to action is really around making sure our own people feel cared for so that they can keep healing for others, attending to their suffering as a means of amplifying their own empathy. It's pretty tough out there right now. And so there's so much beautiful work to do to honor really the incredible, messy, broken imperfectness that is humanity. And this is the work I want to spend my life doing.
Adrienne.
Oh, what?
Crying like I'm watching clouds over here.
Well, I have like this pile of tissues that prove I've watched it. Like, geez.
We all do. You should be sponsored by Kleenex, Justin. If you're not, you should start working on that. Adrienne, I mean, that just one reflection back to you is I just want to acknowledge your bravery. I mean, to call these things by their name, right? We can't heal them unless we call them by their name. We just can't. And to find somebody in a position of leadership, in such an influential position of leadership, who has the bravery to talk about their own experience in such a way, lets me, and I'm sure everyone on this call, feel like healthcare has hope.
Well, thanks. Please know it's not me, right? It's all of us. You know that. Most of us are just trying to get our hair combed to make sure our socks match every day.
Well, your hair looks great. So Natassia has been on the front lines in the ICU in New York City, working as an ICU nurse in a cancer center during COVID, during this pandemic, during the most intense spike that this country has seen probably ever around any kind of experience. I wanted to honor you, Natassia, for taking the time and having the energy for this, but also tell us a bit about your experience, how it's changed with COVID, and what it's like to be an ICU nurse. And you know me, I'm in a panel. I'm going to add a few other just questions, because then whoever knows what happens. What have you learned about caring during this time? But also any feelings you had while watching clouds. So there's your trifecta times 2.
I'm going to try to remember all of them. I think I'll start with the easiest answer, which is, what did I feel watching clouds? So many emotions. I cried. I think most people did, but I think, it hits home because it's a lived experience for a lot of people. And for us, it's sometimes we're lucky enough to be watching it from the outside, and it's a blessing to be able to do that. And so it's just that much harder to understand that there is a person that had a full life while going through such an enormous, diagnosis, and just knowing that they're going to die and being able to face their own mortality. I think that takes a certain strength that most of us don't have. At least I don't know that I would have that strength. So overall, I think it was a beautiful movie and very well done. And yeah, it just left me in tears. For your other questions, I should say that COVID, I think, hit New York very hard, and we at Memorial were blessed in that it didn't hit us the way it hit other hospitals. So I think we are, in our own sense, lucky. I think Adrienne said a lot of what healthcare workers feel in their hearts. We want to deliver full care to all of our patients, but I think the way the healthcare system is set up, the language that we use, just in how we have to introduce or talk about patients and what they're going through. We aren't saying, hey, this is Zach, he loves music, he has great friends, he has an enormous support system. We are saying, this is Zach, he's an 18-year-old male with osteosarcoma. I think we just need to reframe the narrative on how we talk about people. In what has changed for me with COVID, I think COVID has shown how much compassionate care is necessary. It's shown that frontline workers really are the bridges that keep the patients and their families together in a time when patients weren't allowed to have visitors. The nurses and the physicians were the ones that were there to provide that support, and how important nonverbal communication is, a healing touch, a hand to hold, someone to say that I am here with you, please don't be scared. Because for something there was very little known at the time, I think we had to really be the people that our patients leaned on. And I think we not only provided compassion to our patients, but to our colleagues. It was a rough time, and one that I think we'll all remember and hopefully continue to learn from. But I think just remembering that our patients are having full lives, and we should be speaking of them based on their preferences and their values and not just their diagnosis. I hope I covered everything.
I think you did. You covered the whole person.
Okay.
And I think that if there's even just one gem, which I know there's already been dozens, for that I'm going to take away, is just that reminder whenever I'm working with healthcare professionals, is just to remind them to share about the person. And that's a hard thing to do when you have so many other things going on. But it's an extraordinary reminder. I'm going to, right before I ask Justin a question, I'm going to thank a few more of our partners because they're extraordinary. So a huge thank you to Votive Health, to the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross Foundation, to the Casa de Luz Foundation, to Institute on Healthcare Directives, to Carely and caregiving.com, to Archangels and Alex Drain, to Teaching Transitions, Doing Death Differently, and to the great organization Death Cafe. These people are doing the work on the ground every day around end of life. But Justin, I've got a question for you about storytelling. It seems like it's so hard to get people to agree to let us tell these stories. It was very, very hard for Mitch Albom to get Tuesdays with Morrie, the most printed biography of all time. It was very hard to get Fault in Our Stars made into a movie, like number 4 teen drama of all time. All of these stories, when they're done well, like Clouds on Disney. Clouds, the song, number 1 on iTunes. People want this. Why is it so hard? And how do we make it so that these end-of-life stories can be more accessible? And those people that do broadcast, how do we get them to start to understand?
Whew. These are pretty big questions. It's that's like asking right now, like, how do we change the political system? I personally believe it starts. Look, I think we have to understand that in any business, I imagine as a doctor, as a healthcare provider, as a filmmaker, as an actor, whatever it is that we choose to do with our lives, it starts with a why. And I think over time, that why can easily be forgotten. One of the Arabic words for human, it's translated to insan, which also one of the many translations means they who forget, right? So it's like insane, insan means they who forget. It's one of the oldest written languages. God is essentially saying, human beings are insane. They are beings who forget. And it's interesting as a Baha'i because our obligatory prayers, the prayers that I try to say every day, the purpose of those prayers is to remember. And I think that we all forget what our purpose is. We all forget why we do what we do. I think that's some of what Adrienne was talking about. I think some of that empathy is lost because we get caught up in the numbers in the system, and we get overwhelmed, and we don't, as Natassia said, like say, hey, this is Zach. He's a 17-year-old male who loves music. He just wrote this amazing song, and he has osteosarcoma, by the way, right? It's like person first, diagnosis second. It's actually something that a lot of the people I have made documentaries about advocate for. Claire Wineland was advocating for that a lot, which is like, I'm a person. I'm not defined by my illness. And I think what happens in Hollywood is a couple things. One is I think we've forgotten our way. We've forgotten why we want to make things, right? In the same way that a doctor can forget why he does surgery. It's not to have the Ferrari in the driveway and the 5 houses and the beach house. It's to help people live better and, relieve pain. For the filmmaker, for the producer, for the studio executives, it can't just be about making money. And what I'm advocating for in our business is the double bottom line, which is, yes, of course we should make money, because money shows that people are consuming what we're making. But the other bottom line is like, what are we doing with it? How are we affecting people? Who are the hearts that we're touching? Film is supposed to be an empathy machine. That's what film and TV is. That's why I am doing it. And I have a feeling like the reason in many ways I think I stick out in this industry and don't feel like I fit in so much is just because I refuse to forget my why. I refuse to forget that, and I really want to help people remember. And that's the beauty of it all is I can have compassion for everybody who forgets, because I also forget, because I'm filled with my trauma and all my crap. And I love, Adrienne, what you said, because I talk about that all the time. I'm like, hey, I'm Justin, I'm messed up. Don't put me on a pedestal. I'm going to fall off very quick. But we just all forget. So if we can just if we can try to help people remember with the why, I think that's one way to change it. I think also people are bitter. They're cynical, especially film critics. Hollywood has stopped making movies for mass audiences, and we're making movies for film critics. Many film critics are, let's be honest, failed screenwriters and filmmakers who are essentially bitter. The entire job is to tell everybody what's wrong with this movie that somebody and 100 other people spent 3 years making. Already you can say, like, that's backwards. We have Rotten Tomatoes as an example, which is like, are you rotten? Or like 5 Feet Apart as an example had a 55% Rotten Tomatoes. Critics hated that movie, but 90-something% of it was like a crazy high audience score because audiences loved it. Already we're looking at the problem. So what does Hollywood do? Hollywood looks at that and they're like, well, we don't want another sick kid movie. We don't want another end of life movie. We don't want another movie where somebody's dying. Because they consider these things tropes. Like one of my favorite responses to Clouds, a few of the people sent me some of the critics was like the predictability of the story. They're like, oh, it was predictable, or that was tropey, or that dialogue. And I think to myself, like, but this is the true story. This is what happened. So like, are we supposed to change that? And I always think about like, well, if somebody was filming us in our personal lives and we didn't know it, half of the stuff we say would be cringeworthy because it's real, right? Art imitates life. So I just go back to thinking about like, we've forgotten why we make movies and who we make movies for, who we make content for. And we need to remember. And the audience also needs to remember. And I think the other problem is by design, we're all in many ways living our lives, and we've designed our lives in such a way that we're trying to forget that one day we will die. So we're distracting ourselves with so many different things that help us forget that we are mortal, that all of us have a terminal illness. The difference is that when you're diagnosed with one, you just know when you're going to go, or at least you're going to go sooner. And so people I think right now, they are afraid of watching things that help them remember that they're going to die. It's easier to forget. My challenge to Hollywood and to audiences are that actually the joy and the bliss starts in the remembering. because that's where life starts, right? Just like you said, the Confucius quote, like our real life begins, our second life begins when we realize that we're dying. And that's what movies can do for us. Movies can help us remember the beautiful, joyful aspects of life. We can see somebody else's suffering. We can feel them empathetically. We can feel for them empathetically. We can have compassion just by sitting down and not moving or doing any work and absorbing something. And then after they watch those things, if they buy it, if they subscribe to the Disney Plus, if they buy Netflix, if they buy a movie ticket, if they buy the book based on the movie, then Hollywood goes, oh, it worked. And they'll make more of them.
Yeah, I think that absolutely. I think that those of us that have realized that how important the why is, it's part of that, the great privilege of that information is the responsibility to share it and to remind people. And I'm curious, Adrienne, and then to Natassia, building on what Justin's talking about, how do we feel like people in healthcare remember the why? How do we remind them? How can we remind them? How can we remind ourselves that when this comes to not being a Hollywood exec, to not being somebody who has an ability to amplify a story, but people that are deciding how we're going to be cared for?
Well, of course I have all the answers to these.
Good.
Let me just tell you everything I know. Just kidding. So a couple of reflections. I mean, Justin is talking about, right, the art of filmmaking and empathy. And I think it's important to remind maybe this audience that the origin of empathy was a German term that meant feeling into art. It was called Einfühlung.
Oh, wow.
And it was the ability to, look at art and project yourself into it. And it only evolved over time when fancy academic behavioral psychologists got in and said, well, it's not about projecting you into or onto something else, right? It's about trying to create that shared understanding or insight into that emotional content. That isn't yours. You're still you. You have to keep your own stuff, but you can imagine and sit in that experience of another. And so art and empathy are like wedded. It's not just nice conversation. These are wedded concepts at their origin. And I think it's really important to maybe think about that a little bit more, especially as Justin talks about some of his dreams, I think, for the future. One of the things that was so prevalent to me in the movie, and I don't know if you did this intentionally or not, but this sort of popped for me, was this idea of meeting people where they are. And I don't mean emotionally, I actually mean you did it physically in the movie. So I'm just going to reflect on that before I answer Michael's question. So, for example, the first time Zach had a conversation with his mom about the seriousness of the disease, what was the analogy she used? She used a painting. So like maybe unbeknownst to you, right, you're actually like digging at the origins of empathy there. She's saying
that's his mom, so that's all real.
That's right. So she's and maybe she just knew. I don't know, right? But she's sort of having this conversation with him about, this is yours, it's your canvas, you can make it what it is. But if you'll notice, he was outside banging his head on the glass. And then she went outside. She didn't say, oh, come into my experience in the nice cozy house. She said, I'm going to come out to your cold, wintry experience on the front step, and I'm going to bring a blanket. That is empathy, right? She is meeting him where he is, which is on that cold, icy, wintry front step. And the same thing with his sister when she's trying to get her to go downstairs, right? And sit with him. She's sitting on the stairs saying, I can't go, I can't go. And the mom literally comes over and sits down on the stair again and says, you can do this. You just have to sit there. You don't have to have the right words. The teacher laying down on the football field, right? Exactly, like Zach's laying there, right? And instead of saying, get up, get back in class, or I'm going to stand here and look down upon you in this conversation, I'm going to come down and see what the view looks like from down there. I mean, Brene Brown knows this, but this is, you have literally taken these concepts of what it means to physically move into the space of another, but also to metaphysically move into the space of another, to try to see through their eyes at their perspective, their level, their vantage point of the clouds. And I want to just call out and honor how beautiful that was for me, as someone who's constantly thinking about, how do I get our clinicians to sit in the bed, to know what it's like to stare at a clock all day long, waiting for people to tell you the results of your MRI. How do I bring that to them? And part of what we've learned is the way to do it, Michael, is to model that to them. So when we, I mean, a good example is the communication skills training. We don't go in there and say, let us tell you all the data for empathy. Let us review the years of science. We actually sit down and say, was anybody on call last night? Has anybody had a chance to eat breakfast? How many hours of sleep did you get? And that way I can understand where you are coming in as you're trying to have this profound experience, to immerse yourself in the emotional experience of another. Because, without food and water, they're anti headspace, right? They're not interested in what you have to learn, because their most foundational needs are met. There's also a tremendous amount of grief I just want to call out right now. And you mentioned Kubler-Ross is one of our supporters here today, right? First stage is denial. And I think a lot of us, maybe Justin, don't watch these movies, right? Because it's much easier to sit down and watch, I don't know, something very distracting. I don't even know if I'm allowed, I can think of a lot of movies that are pretty distracting that don't force me to feel. Because that denial is the only thing holding me together all day as I'm trying to manage my own grief. And there's a lot of grief out there right now. And I think there's no secret sauce for it other than bringing the same skills to our people that you want to see in the world, that you want to see them display. We have to meet them where they are, and something this movie just blew me away around. So thank you for that.
Wow, thank you so much.
I'm glad that this is recorded so that we can go back and glean.
Can you become an official movie reviewer by chance?
Right? Shouldn't you do a version of Clouds where the analysis is actually from people like Adrienne?
I mean, I took like 6 pages of I was.
Oh my God, I would love to have a conversation with you afterwards. I'd also love to know things that maybe didn't sit well also, because that's the only way we get better and we improve this.
Maybe we won't do that today, but Natassia, you have an opportunity if you want to. But a couple things for you, Natassia. One, any reflections on the conversation over the last 20 minutes? 2, I mean, I think nursing is the embodiment of this embodied practice that Adrienne is talking about. Thank God for you.
I second that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll add on a cherry on top. You've got a big audience here. How do we support nurses better? So those are your you multiple choice. Choose your own adventure.
Oh wow. I want to say that again. I think Adrienne speaks really to what most healthcare providers feel, and really she's so inspiring. But I think as nurses, we really carry a huge burden where we are, and my colleagues are, the people that are with our patients for a majority of their time. And for us specifically, we are with them at the end of the road when they're at their sickest or they're going through the toughest parts. And I think sometimes we need to remind ourselves that these are people that were living and have families, their mothers, their daughters, their husbands, their wives. I think reminding ourselves that the person that we're seeing in the bed is not the person that is known to their loved ones, and to just bring us back to that. I think that will help us empathize, because I think more often than not, we're seeing someone that's so ill and really at the end of their road, and we're wondering, what is it that we keep, what are we doing? Well, we're doing it because this person was the provider for their family, or the foundation for what was there, or this is what they value, this is what they want. So I think reminding ourselves for that. And really, I feel that our nurses, especially at MSK, do that so well. But to also have really honest conversations, I think is important. Having upfront honest conversations with our patients, with their families at the get-go, to say, this is what your journey will look like. I think we can do a better job of having those conversations. And I think sometimes as nurses, our frustrations is that we feel that maybe our patients or their families aren't fully prepared. And, we are calling our physicians and saying, please, can you have this conversation? Can you come, please sit with them? They are scared and they're not sure what is happening. Can you please just give them the reality of what is going on? I think sometimes we feel kind of trapped knowing things that we can't share with the families. So I think really just supporting the bedside nurses who are having this fight and wanting to fight and advocate for their patients as well, I think will make a tremendous difference. That I don't remember the other question. I think there was a third.
I think you got it. And Natassia, you've got me for life, as committed, as a person who's committed to making sure that people do have these conversations before they end up in a clinical setting. That they have comprehensive plans, that they've thought about it, that there's a literacy around this topic. And speaking of, one of the great advocates, allies, leaders in the healthcare space, who has, as much as anybody else in the modern era, created more literacy around the topic of death and dying well. Dr. Shoshana Ungerleider is here, my dear friend and founder of Endwell. And she is here to tell us, because there's another cultural moment happening where death is going mainstream, where ending well is going mainstream. The floor is yours, Shoshana.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Michael and the panelists, and Justin. This has been just an amazing conversation, and it's great to see you. And what an incredible film, Justin. Kudos to you and the film team. As Michael said, I'm a physician and the founder of Endwell, and we're an organization that's focused on transforming serious illness and the end of life into a human-centered experience. And in a regular year, we typically convene a large event in December and have incredible speakers on stage like Justin, like Michael, talking about living and ending well. And this has been touched on today already, but the pandemic has really shown us all just how fragile life is, that tomorrow is never a given, no matter how old you are. And it's also shown a light on this hidden world of what being a caregiver looks like, both in informal family caregivers and frontline healthcare workers, as well as grief and loss on a truly massive scale. It's cracked wide open the significant existing racial and economic disparities in care that have frankly always existed, but are playing out quickly in real time as a result of COVID. And this year we realized at Endwell that we have a unique opportunity to reach people in a new way, virtually, for an experience on December 10th called Take 10. And we've made it free and accessible for everyone to join in this really urgent conversation. We have celebrities and then everyday heroes coming together for this immersive online experience. We're going to hear from Justin Baldoni, Maria Shriver, Taraji P. Henson, Blair Underwood, Andy Cohen, Norman Lear, Larry King, Marla Gibbs, Atul Gawande, Roger Daltrey from The Who, and moderated by Soledad O'Brien, alongside incredible unsung heroes frontline nurses, doctors, social workers, artists, educators, designers, and some entrepreneurs who will talk about caregiving, about grief and loss, about mental health, and how that impacts every piece of this, as well as the end of life in light of this extraordinarily challenging year. So this is a free event open to everyone, and I hope you'll join with us and bring the people that you care about to take 10 minutes to reflect on your life, to then think about the end of it. And you can register now online at endwellproject.org.
We should, we do this practice on Zoom calls and on where we rub our hands together to create some energy, and then we give it back to the people speaking. And that's to everyone, and to Shoshana for lifting us all up that are doing it in this space.
Thank you.
It's incredible. And we've shared the link to Endwell Project. Please RSVP. If you're in healthcare systems too, send it to your communications department, send it to whoever. The more clinicians that are at that experience, as well as the general public, the better. We've got a little bit of time left. There's so many questions in the Q&A, and what we're gonna do is I'll download them and get back to any specific ones after this, because I don't know if we're gonna get to all of them. But there are some questions about what's next, Justin. How do you continue? You started Wayfarer Studios as a place to share some of these stories. Can you give us a sneak preview? And maybe, I thought maybe there was something you wanted to ask the audience. I don't know. I'll leave it to you. What's next in your world?
Well, I was just looking at this, at these questions, and if I can, for just a couple minutes, I want to, because this is a very specific audience, I want to share two things. One is, I'm going to try to quickly share the experience that led me down this path, because it was actually thanks to palliative care workers and hospice workers that I believe that I'm even doing this work today, in combination with my belief in my faith. And then I'll use that as a way to say, like, an idea that I have. So I was 20 years old, and my uncle Louis, I actually shared a little bit of the story at the Endwell Symposium a couple of years ago, but I was 20 years old and my uncle Louis had lung cancer. And I didn't know him that well. I started to get to know him actually as he was dying. And it's one of the ways I realized that this work, I was drawn to it. You know, a lot of people feel like they run from it. And I found myself being like, wait, he's dying. No, I need to go to him. I need to meet him where he is, if you will, Adrienne. So I flew out to Florida a couple times. He was in Naples, Florida. And the last time I flew out, because nobody else was able to, and he had a week or so left. And I remember at 20 years old, having no clue what the hell I was doing there, but feeling like spiritually I was supposed to be there to help him. I later learned that there is such thing as a death doula. There are professions built around these servant hearts, just like we had a doula in birth. And again, I gave a talk for Shoshana about birth and death being the same. But I remember being 20 years old and seeing my family panicking and not knowing what to do. And I remember the nurses were so calm, and they kept giving him more medicine, and they kept doing their best to hold space. And I remember having conversations with these nurses who were like living saints, these hospice workers and doctors who cared so deeply about not just my uncle, but all of us in the space that we were sharing with him. And at one point he wasn't going, and you know, my uncle's religion was golf. I think he was really afraid to die. And I just remember wanting to hold space. I remember getting on the phone and calling people that he hadn't talked to in 10 or 15 years on speakerphone and letting them apologize for their things and saying, I'm sorry. And they're crying on the other end. And he's in between this world and the next, and still in pain and fidgety. And that didn't work. And I remember asking, the kids and the other relatives to maybe leave because he needed space. We went through all of it. And finally, at the very end, he was modeling, as all of you know what that term means. And I was sitting there with my aunt holding his hand, and I just got this feeling that I should go get music. And I asked her, I said, hey, does he have any music? maybe in his car or anything. And she said, yeah, he's got all these old CDs that he would listen to in his car. So I ran to the car, came back. I popped a CD player in my, 2004 MacBook, whatever I had, because we had CDs back then. And I just pressed play. I had no idea what CD I put in. And I just said, we should, I really felt we should pray. This was like the time, because he was getting really close. His breathing was changing. And as the music was playing, he took his last breath, took one deep, and then exhaled. And I looked over, and she goes, oh my God, he's gone. And as he took his last breath, as we were sitting there, the music mid-song skipped. And it skipped to a completely different track. And I had no shuffle on my, no button was pressed. It was over, the computer was over there. His body was here, and we were holding his hand. And then she just got a huge smile on her face and started crying as she's holding his hand 5-6 seconds after he took his last breath. And that's because the song had skipped to track number 13 from track number 1 or 2, because that was the song they danced to on their first date. And that ties this into, the space that we hold for people as they're dying is such a powerful space. And my personal belief, and this is the second question, because I saw a few people ask, what do you say to somebody who's afraid to die? And I'm just going to give you a 1-minute version of what I believe. I believe that birth and death are the same. And I believe that we spend our lives on this earth just like we spend our lives in the womb. All right, we got 9-10 months in the womb. We got all we need. We're developing our arms and our eyes and our ears, and we have no use for them in the womb, while we're coexisting in another place that is very, very different than the womb. A place where people are waiting for us, who are excited for us, who can influence our lives without us ever realizing it. And then one day we die of that womb in a pretty, painful process. And suddenly we're born into this world that was existing the entire time. We just had no eyes to see it, because our eyes didn't work there. They work here. And in this new world, all those things we were developing, we have use for. We suddenly need our eyes and our ears and our lungs to breathe. We need all of these things. And my belief in this world where we are right now is that we are in the next womb, and all these things we're developing, just like Adrienne said, specifically empathy and compassion, kindness, love, sincerity, all the things we need to fix the world, to fix our healthcare system, to fix the movie industry, to fix the political system, are all the spiritual attributes that make us human. Those are the arms and legs of this world that we are developing for the next. And my belief is that we are coexisting with that world just like we are in this, which is why my uncle, on the moment of his death, I believed, made that track skip to the exact same song that he knew she needed to hear. Which is why I knew that Zach, as I was directing this movie, was right there with me every step of the way. It's why I had an empty director's chair with his name on it that nobody could sit in, because I believed he was sitting in it the whole time. So if you're out there watching, and I saw a few comments, and you are afraid of that, just so you know, I am too. But at the end of the day, if we have a belief that this isn't the end, that maybe this is just another beginning, then it might ease a little bit of that anxiety that comes with having that illness. And I also hope that doctors and nurses and hospice workers, and a lot of death doulas and hospice workers have this belief anyways, because if you were to take a survey of all of these hospice workers, they would tell you that the stories that they've heard about and seen are unexplainable and unbelievable. That maybe that's one of the ways that we can change our industry and our business and the healthcare industry as well, which is helping people believe that maybe this isn't the end.
I think you did, in fact, answer everything. I think we have a whole cosmology figured out today, Justin. You got much more than you bargained for with your price of admission today, people. You should see the comments to this side. Yeah, exactly. That was extraordinary. You still have a couple minutes talk about.
All right, here's the crazy idea. You ready? Here's the crazy idea.
Crazy idea.
Here's a crazy idea. I talked to Michael about it. I brought it up to Adrienne. I made the show My Last Days. My Last Days, the whole idea of it is we're walking with somebody on their journey to dying and helping them tell their story. And in that process, it can be extremely healing for not just that person, but for their family. But also what it does is it creates empathy. It is a empathy like spark for the filmmaker, for the crew who's making the movie. Like our entire film set that made this movie for Zach changed. Suddenly people thought about things totally differently. The crew that goes and makes these documentaries changes. And the families that are on the other end have a chance to share things they haven't normally shared, because when you put a camera there, something happens, because we're creating a living legacy and creating conversations that are uncomfortable that don't normally talk about. So what I want to do, and it starts with hospice and healthcare workers and organizations like you, is what if we created an organization, a nonprofit, a foundation, where we partnered young budding filmmakers with huge, big goals and dreams to become filmmakers like myself, with hospice centers and children's cancer hospitals and palliative care facilities, to create a program where, as part of a curriculum, almost a mandatory curriculum for these universities, for these final grad students, they were paired with somebody who was dying, and they had to film them and document them and walk with them in their, throughout their final days and tell their story. Because I believe, one, we could create a library and bring so much healing to so many people who, as both of you said, just want to know that they're valued or seen or important. And so many people don't have family. So many people at the end of life are alone and they die alone. But what if there was a way that they could share their story and they knew that a part of them was going to live on? And what if we could change the trajectory of 21, 22-year-olds who think they want to go make big action movies, but instead, once they meet this participant who is dying and they tell their story, they realize that, wow, maybe there's more that I want to do in this film business. Maybe I want to heal people with my art, because something energetically changes, and it changed in me when I started. And I believe that it can change in more people. And that's how you heal the world, by giving people a chance to feel what it's like to walk with somebody at the end of their lives, to participate in that healing, and then to figure out how to turn that into art, which, as you said, Adrienne, which blew my mind, is the origin of empathy. So at some point, maybe we'll do it, Michael. If everybody wants to say yes, then we'll figure it out. But I think that we should do this and create an opportunity to have a library and a My Last Days for every university and palliative care center, where young and old people are partnered with young filmmakers to change the world for the better. Yes. That's my big dream.
Michael, I don't know about you, but Endwell is in. So whatever we can do to support, this is an amazing idea. I love it. It's perfect.
Yes, of course I'm in, Justin. I already told you I was from the beat. The dangerous thing with telling an idea like this to this group of people is you are going to get what you asked for.
Well, I can't do it myself. And someone just said start in high school. I would love that. I don't care where it starts. I just believe that empathy starts when you're put in that situation. It's not like something changes when you are responsible physically for telling someone's story. And if it weren't for Zach deeply changing my life and affecting my heart, and his mom and his family, who are still my friends today, there's no chance. I would have given up on this a long time ago. Why would I try to make a movie about Zach? Like, I didn't make any money off that. Like, I didn't get rich off it. But I got rich here. And that's what I want people to experience, So.
Oh, Justin, I can't let the moment go without saying, part of the reason that empathy can be so powerful is it's contagious. Right? There's studies that actually demonstrate the contagion of empathy. And there's a beautiful quote that says about healthcare that we heal to be healed. That part of why we empathize and lean into the experience of another is because the gift it gives back is greater, and there's therapeutic potential for healing. And that's what you're describing in the filmmakers. That's what I would describe as the why for most healthcare workers. And so that potential is greater than any single one of us. And if we harness it, right, we just might heal a little bit of the world. And we'd love to join you in that.
And we start with healing ourselves. So that's how we start, right? Like all of us are dealing with our traumas. And that's why, I mean, selfishly, that's why I'm doing it, is it's healing me every time I do something, every time. And I feel that, you know, so I love that you put that, I'm just going to have you on speed dial. Michael, I see why you guys are so close. I'm going to be like, hey.
Exactly. We are a little bit over time. And so one thing for all of you to know is this video is being recorded. We will send it to you. Please share it. Share it with people in your healthcare system. You know, as well as I do, they need to see it. Please, the way that this is going to go for the next few minutes, just so you know, we're going to thank our panelists and Justin. I'm going to then go through and do another round of thanking our partners, like these saints that they are. You can stay on if you want, understand? And then we're gonna do one last thing. This is like the rolling credits. All of you that are listening are now members of EOL. It means that you can create an end-of-life plan, connect with providers, you can connect with experts, etc. We're gonna show you the little EOL 2-minute film. You are under no obligation whatsoever to stay on and watch it. I will not be hurt. We're over time. Some of you have already seen it. So that's just the way it's going to go. So first.
And real quick, Michael, before you do that, I need 5 seconds.
You got it.
This movie, because I want to talk about clouds, wouldn't have happened if his mom, if Laura Sobiak, didn't turn her pain into art. And her book came out this last week. She re-released it, and it's called Clouds, a Memoir. And it is a mom's journey holding and walking with her son that I really, really think everybody should read. It's so powerful, and it's so raw, and it's so honest, and it's what I built the movie around. So if you can support Laura and that work, that would mean the world to me, because if it were not for her, I would have not had the chance to be the custodian of her and Zach's story.
Yeah, would everybody go to bookshop? No, it's perfect. So thank you, Justin, for being a friend and for being a champion. Thank you, Adrienne, for being a friend and a champion, and Natassia, my new friend, and Shoshana, my old friend. Thank you, everyone, for joining. This has been extraordinary. Now here it comes. I'm gonna read the list of remaining partners, like some people read the names of saints. The National End-of-Life Doula Association, the New York Zen Center for Contemplative Care, the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization, Compassion and Choices, Heal Grief, the ACPE, the Chaplain Education Organization, Eternova, the Dinner Party, Doula Givers, the Chaplaincy Innovation Lab, Going with Grace, the Luna, the Safe Crossings Foundation, SWIPN, that's the social workers, Trust and Will, George Mark Children's House, and the American Telemedicine Association. Just a few partners brought all of this to us today. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to make an effort here to share my screen, and then we will leave with, oh, I lost the ability to share my screen. There we go. Start share. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see all of you over in EOL. Thank you, Justin, Adrienne, Shoshana, Natassia. Off we go. Life is a journey. There is a beginning, middle, and an end, with some exciting mishaps and adventures along the way. And yes, every journey has a final chapter. The final chapter of our life and the lives of our loved ones is filled with many challenges, many decisions, questions about wills and advanced care directives, memorials, and quality of life. For the last 8 years, we have been talking to people about their end-of-life wishes, a lot of people, sparking over 1 million conversations, talking to the young, the old, and the in-between. We learned a lot, and a light bulb went off in our head. What if there was a beautiful, welcoming place to go that would turn this task of thinking about the future into something engaging and meaningful? A place that could help us feel calm, a place where we were not alone. At the End of Life Collective, which we affectionately call EOL, we have gathered hundreds of the best caregivers and service providers together in one place. We built a community of the most knowledgeable end-of-life teachers and guides. We built simple tools so you and your family can create a complete plan, all in one place. And we made it free and available to everyone. On EOL, you will find service providers to help you with financial and legal planning for wills and trusts and medical documentation. You can explore insurance options and find the best in later stage living. We will help you if you're in the middle of a difficult time and are looking for memory care or the most trusted hospice and palliative care options. Maybe you are planning for a funeral or are interested in green burial, or perhaps you are struggling with grief. You will find a community ready to help you with all of these things. And most importantly, EOL is focused on wellness. We are committed to helping people live the best lives possible, even in the hardest of times. At RoundGlass, we strongly believe that the last chapter of our life, even if it is very far off, has so much to teach us, so many gifts to give. EOL is a place to gather together and plan for life's last chapter. This is the very beginning of this new adventure. Take a peek and let us know if you like what you see.